Okay, let's do this. Welcome back to Words of Ex-Mormon. It is Sunday, and so we are well on our way into my Mormon story. At the end of last week, I was talking about Relief Society, and I had been called to be the second counselor in the Relief Society, so that's where I was serving. And I was just talking about my experiences there, which are plentiful. And again, like last week, I had a couple of pages to talk about. I had like 7 to 8 pages. That's kind of the printed amount because I keep notes so that I stay on track and don't forget anything important. And I had about 7 or 8 pages, which is normal, but, and that usually fills up about an hour. And I only got 2 pages in because I was going off on tangents and talking about things. This is not my childhood. This is a year ago. So it's coming up. I don't remember the exact date. I keep looking in my history on my Facebook page. Like my memories, because I know that I made a post about it a couple of weeks, so I'm pretty sure at this point, the end of February is when I officially decided to leave the church, but then I had like a period of time where I didn't say anything, and then I didn't announce it or anything like that, but then like people kept like reaching out to me like, oh, I missed you at church, and which I appreciate. I appreciate that they didn't just not notice that I was there, like on some level I made some sort of impact. Of course, I was in the Relief Society, and so they had to replace me, and that was kind of obvious, I'm sure. We missed you, and here's my testimony, and here's an article to read, and here's, like they started doing that kind of a thing. And so then I, Miss Clementine back there, she's cute. It's my girl. But so this was just a year ago, and that day that I made the announcement on Facebook and I said, I've left the church and everything, that hasn't come up yet, and I don't remember what day it was. So I'm checking that out, and I'm sure I'll talk about it here when I come across it. However, in the meantime, I'm talking about my time in the church. This is from 2022 until I left in 2024. And it's about my experiences as a Relief Society leadership member. And it's still quite new. Unlike my childhood, unlike my teenagerhood, even my early years as a parent, that was 20 years ago. And so there are fewer details and fewer emotions involved with it that I have conveyed so far. So I haven't gotten quite off on the tangents that I have in the last one, and probably will in this one, because I remember those things very poignantly. So I don't know how it was done in other wards, but in my ward, what we would do is the way that we chose lessons for Relief Society and Elders Quorum, so that we were on the same page. We talked about the same things, and we could go home, and the idea was to talk about your family, talk about those things with your family, and you'd have the same topic, the same talk to talk about, because for Relief Society and Elders Quorum, there wasn't like a manual. It wasn't like come follow me. Come follow me was for Sunday school, and the family home evening and seminary, those lessons were taught in those other classes. But for Relief Society and Elders Quorum, we used the talks from the previous conference. So from April to October, we would use the April conference, like Liahona, and we'd choose talks from that. And then from October to the next April, we would use the lessons, the talks from that Liahona that had the conference talks from October, and that's what we would use for the lessons. And we would do lessons on those ones. So what we did in our ward was for, you know, the Relief Society would choose for one portion of the year and give it to the elders quorum, and they would teach the same lessons. And then the next conference, the men would make the choices of the lessons to teach. And so we kind of switched back and forth. And it was, let's see, I think in 2023, I had said that I felt like all the talks from the women that were in the last session should be taught during this 6 months period. And I think at the time we only had 4 talks from women. So considering that there are, what is it, like 5 sessions, because there's 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday, and usually there's like a Relief Society conference or an Elders Quorum conference. There's 5 sessions, and I don't know, I want to say like at least 6. Like each talk is about 15 minutes. So like, you know, 6 talks or so each session, and most of them are men. The Quorum of the 70s, the First Presidency, you know, the 12 Apostles, those guys will speak. And usually the Relief Society president, the primary president, you know, those women, or in the presidencies, those women will sometimes speak. And I think at the time we had 4 talks that were by women. And considering we were going to have 2 lessons a month for 6 months, that's 12 lessons. If we had 4 women's talks, I felt like that was a good ratio. We would be hearing from the women. And I said, I think all the women's talks should be in there. And the other presidency members totally disagreed. And they gave me 1 female talk, 1 talk from a woman, and they didn't even assign it to me. They wouldn't let me be the person who taught it. They were like, no, we'll give it to a different person. We want you to talk about this other thing or whatever. They argued that women do not speak prophetically and that we need to turn to the men for the prophetic guidance. And I personally felt very, very marginalized by that and repressed by other women who I wasn't specifically saying anyway that those women were speaking prophetically. I was just saying that we're teaching the lessons to women. We are talking to the Relief Society. We should hear from women, and the men should also be acknowledging and hearing from women as well. And that our perspective is also important in the church as well. But they were like, no, there's no prophetic guidance there, which isn't true anyway. Like women, regardless of like our intuition, whether you call it prophetic or revelatory or whatever, or just intuition, we have a lot to offer. And, you know, not only that, but like the men, like they always speak prophetically. Come on. No, it's just ridiculous. Anyway, but I couldn't really wrap my head around how those women could also not feel that way and how they didn't notice what they were saying about that. Furthermore from that, like anytime a man was present, like even at an activity or in the building or something, the Relief Society president would just defer to him. It could have been like an activity that I personally organized and planned and everything, and it was for the women. And remember, I was second counselor, so I was in charge of the activities committee. And she would still insist that the men pray and talk and introduce the activity. And it was so bizarre. Like, in the Elders Quorum president at the time was also, his wife was a lot like me. I love her. I still love her. And I still really respect him and everything. And it's like, you know, they're still in the church and stuff, and they've moved away and since then. But they are just super conscious of the same things that I'm conscious of. And he always at least had the the decency to be like, this isn't my activity. You guys have that authority. You really don't need to ask me to pray. Like, that's okay. Go ahead and announce it and do your thing, And it was just kind of bizarre, though, that she always was like, no, you're the priesthood, you're the patriarch here, so please ask somebody to say the prayer. He's like, I'm pretty sure you guys can figure out who can say the opening prayers without me. It's not a big deal. And it was just bizarre. And I'm sure it was frustrating for those men who were like there to participate or forced to take charge when it wasn't their activity to be in charge of. And they had no idea what to do. They had no idea what the activity was about, So I also got really frustrated with local leadership who forced their congregations to adhere to outdated rules and opinions that the church had largely gone away from in a quote, like, official capacity, because they had feelings about it. I kind of feel like the church has, we have the prophet at the top, but also, like, we have local leaderships. We have stake presidents and we have bishoprics. And I mean, like, there's other like area presidency and everything, but mainly like wards deal with their bishop and then their stake president also as kind of like their jurisdiction, or whoever they will talk about at the church. It's always going to be their bishop first and then their stake president. And we do deal pretty regularly with the stake president. And the bishop is kind of looked at as the boss, but the stake president is lauded as basically like a mini prophet. So if your bishop says it, even if it's wrong, you're good, you're okay, you can do that thing, or you can follow that advice even though it's not correct. But if, and people will take that, like a bishop can stand up in a sacrament meeting or give a testimony or something and say that something that is totally bizarre and off the cuff, and people will double down on that and be like, oh, well, the bishop said this, and they'll take it like it's a rule. And the same thing is exacerbated if it's the stake president. So, what he says and what the bishop says, what the stake president says, whatever it is, even if it's BS, that is a go. It is what you have to do, because we are taught that those men are called to have jurisdiction over us, to be our leaders, and they are called of God and given the authority to basically tell us what to do. So, it's seen as that divine revelation, and we are taught that they have that power and that authority. So pants, for example, you guys have met Scarlett, my beautiful, gorgeous daughter, Scarlett. She is bisexual, but she does identify as female, and she doesn't dress in drag or anything. She's grungy. She's a grungy kind of girl, but she's also very feminine. Which, frankly, like, I don't care if somebody dresses in drag, if someone is transgender and they are wearing gender affirming clothing or whatever. Like, I'm all for it. Like, I have no problem with that. I'm just saying that, like, Scarlett wasn't really doing anything out of the norm. Do you know what I mean? Like, the norm. She hates dresses, really. Sometimes in the summertime she'll wear some skirts, but really she does not like dresses very much, and she doesn't wear them even for band. My kids have been very, very significantly involved in band, and they have these concerts where they have to wear concert black, and they can wear a dress that is black, or they can wear a suit that is black, or they can wear any various thing in between. So slacks, black dress shirt kind of a thing, but it's all black. It's very professional. That's typically what is worn in a professional setting. It's called concert black, and it's very dressy and very classy. And so Scarlett doesn't really wear dresses, and so even for her concerts for school, she would wear concert black, which was women's fitted slacks. They were very pretty. They were very fitted, and then they were kind of like flared at the bottom, and then, you know, some high heels, and black dress shirt that's fitted. It's a woman's black dress shirt, not an oversized anything like that, a very fitted dress shirt. Sleeves rolled up, and then like a fitted black vest over the top. It was just very, very classy. She looked stunning. But like all the older people in the ward would always be really snooty about her and say things like, well, where are your Sunday clothes, you know? And our bishop at the end there, he wouldn't let the boys pass the sacrament without a white shirt and a tie. I have a very eccentric boy, Teague. He is 14, and he's awesome. He is so fun and so unique, and he just does not give a damn what anyone thinks of him, which I admire so much. But this boy, like, for example, he dresses very nice. He does. He wears costumes though all the time, and they're very, like, he wears costumes as clothes. So the things that he wears, they're not just like cheapy kind of material. He'll wear a cloak, but it's a heavy, like, functional cloak, you know. He also, but it's not just like fantasy. Like, he has various suits, several different suits, very nice fitted 3-piece suits, and stuff. And he had this one suit when he first started passing the sacrament when he was 12. It was like this blue plaid steampunk kind of style suit that he would wear. It had a bow tie, and he would often wear a hat with it. He had this, we did family steampunk pictures. We did a themed thing. It was really super fun. But he had a bowler hat that was like, it had fox ears on it, like metallic, like they were like machinery kind of. And I have pictures on my wall of it. I don't know. I'll have to show it to you sometime. Anyway, he, you know, like cogs and things or whatever, and he'd wear that. But he would take that off to pass the sacrament. But there were times too where he'd be wearing a bow tie, and the bishop would pull out a tie and make him put on his bow tie, put on a tie instead of a bow tie. And once we kind of figured this out, we stopped having him wear a bow tie. Not really because we were like, oh, this is what we need to do, this is the right thing to do, but I was like, well, I don't want my son to be embarrassed, like that he has to change his clothes, like, let's just jump through that hoop, you know. But I was annoyed about it because my son was showing up to church dressed nicely, especially for him. Like, that was his style. Like, he did not need to conform to what other people wore on a regular basis. That was dressed up very nicely for him, and he was comfortable in it without feeling like he had to be dressed in a more mundane way that would be very boring and not him at all. You know, and we toned that down, and I made sure he always wore a white shirt because he would not be allowed to pass the sacrament if he wasn't wearing a white shirt. You know, so like, yeah, some other things that I have like here, like he always wears elf ears, or he'll wear like tuxedo, like with the tails. He carries an umbrella, like a vintage looking umbrella. He carries that around all the time. That kind of thing. Like, he's very eccentric and very, very fun. And I love it. I love that about him. But you know, like we did have one, I just love this. There was one of the young men leaders. He noticed one time when Teague was getting ready to pass the sacrament, and he was wearing some elf ears, and he came to me and he was like, you know, is it okay if we ask Teague to remove the elf ears to pass the sacrament, or is that part of his identity? Is that something that he feels comfortable? And he has a transgender son, so I appreciate the empathy that he had for my son. And I was like, no, he's already been talked to. He's going to take them off before he passes the sacrament out of respect. Like, it's totally going to be fine. I totally appreciate you asking about, you know, how he identifies and everything. And it was awesome. It was a really good conversation. And I appreciated that he took my son's feelings and his identity into consideration before asking. But I was like, no, it's just a costume for him. It's not a part of his identity. And he knows he will take those off before the sacrament prayer. hair. And he was like, okay, awesome. Thank you. And it was great. But like, juxtaposed to another bishop, and like people just conformed to that, like people conformed to that where they were like, okay, well, and I did too. I was like, okay, you have to wear a white shirt to church. You can't wear a blue one, or you can't wear, something that has a print on it. It has to be a white shirt, and you have to, that's, what you have to do because this bishop is in charge, and what he says goes. He's divinely inspired, but really I feel like it was really like exclusionary. I don't feel like that was something that benefited everybody. Like, who cares if a kid that is 12 years old and doesn't buy their own clothes and doesn't have the ability to go and decide for themselves, like what they're going to necessarily, like to a degree, but like their parents buy their clothes, their parents provide these things. What if a parent doesn't have the money to go and buy a white shirt? It's excluding these children that don't have any control over that, and we had the ability to say, here's a white shirt and a fairly toned down outfit for you to wear to pass the sacrament. Like, nobody cares about that, but the bishop kind of made it a thing that we were supposed to care about what these kids were wearing versus what their worthiness was, and juxtapose that with our previous bishop who, Mahone, my oldest, he was at his dad's, and, my ex's was not a member. From the time we got divorced, he was not a person who went to church. And so my kids did not go to church when they were at his house for the weekend. It was his weekend. And so they did not go to church during that time. And, my son, Mahone, he came home, the kids came home unexpectedly one Sunday. And I think he was, ow, just bit my lip while I'm talking to you. I'm very clumsy. Anyway, so he came home one Sunday, and I didn't expect them to come home. I didn't know they were coming home, and their dad dropped them off, and they all came and sat down. My girls were in jeans. Mahone was in jeans, and it was before church. It wasn't like in the middle of sacrament meeting. It was like as sacrament meeting was starting, so they came and sat down. I was like, oh, cool, I'm glad you're here, and the girls were not wearing dresses, and Mahone was wearing jeans and like a white t-shirt, and he had like a buffalo plaid shirt over it, and like some Converse or whatever. Like, obviously, if they had gotten ready with me, we would have gotten ready and they would have worn dresses and everything. But also, I didn't think it was a big deal for them to come in there and sit down. They were children. They didn't have any control over it. It wasn't a big deal. I wasn't going to take them home and get them changed or anything like that. Like, they were fine the way they were. But Mahone came and he sat next to me, and I think he was like, I don't know, he probably wasn't early brand new 12. He was probably 13, 14. And he came and he sat down next to me, and the bishop came up and was like, hey, Mahone, go pass the sacrament. And Mahone was like, but I'm not dressed for church. Like, I'm just, and the bishop was like, you're worthy. And your clothes don't tell me that you're worthy. Like, that's not what makes you worthy. And, and I teared up about that. I felt like it was so inclusive and so wonderful. And the same son went on that summer to dye his hair blue with permission from the bishop, which again, like, I shouldn't need permission from the bishop for me or my son or anybody to do something with their hair that is not permanent or anything like that. Even permanent things to your body, like piercings or tattoos, you don't need permission. But he did. He talked to the bishop and was like, would I be allowed to pass the sacrament if I dye my hair blue for the summer? And because they have rules at school about their hair dye. They can dye their hair, but it's supposed to be, not that the school really like enforces that. Scarlett has had lots of different color hair and she's never been in trouble for it. But especially the younger schools, they do have some rules about hair color and hair dye. And so during the summer is a good time to do it when you don't have a dress code that you have to follow. Anyway, the bishop was like, you know what? I know your heart. We do our bishop's interviews. You have a temple recommend for your age and you're awesome. So do what you want because your hair color does not tell me anything about your worth. And, at the same time, I was 1 foot out of the church at the time anyway. I was doubling down, doing those things, going through the motions and everything, but I was still very disenchanted with the religion, but we were under that bishop that we felt like we had autonomy. We felt like we had, we could make decisions for ourselves. We could think for ourselves. We could think critically. We could make decisions, and we could not feel like we were under a watchful eye all the time, And then we got that new bishopric where it kind of went back to like the very strict rules of white shirt, hair off the collar, nothing extravagant. Also, my daughter and I, me and Scarlett, we sang in sacrament a lot. We do a lot of musical theater, so we kind of get involved in that pretty naturally. And it was pretty straight. With the previous bishop, we actually did a song with a guitar, and it was a Christmas song. It was kind of a little bit of like a bluegrass kind of song, couple of guitars, and it was really fun, very cool. Mahone did a saxophone solo. We had a kid that did a trumpet song in sacrament meetings, so he pushed the boundaries a little bit, and then we were kind of back to this, like, the songs have to be in the hymn book, and if they're not in the hymn book, then we have to get special permission, and to do those and everything, which it was fine. Again, like, we adhered to it, we didn't push back or anything, because we are taught we don't have the authority to speak out about that kind of thing. The bishop, he makes the rules, you follow the rules, end of story. But like, there's that whole everyone is welcome thing, and if a stranger comes in off the street and they're in jeans and a t-shirt, like, oh, you're so welcome, come on in. But like, not if you choose to be baptized. Once you choose to be baptized, white shirt and tie, missionary haircut, we pretend to accept you, as you are, because we want to ensnare you in the trap. And then once you're one of us, you damn well better look and act like us, And I've talked a lot about my tattoos. They are super important to me. Big part of my deconstruction, because they represent a break away from that idea that my body isn't my own and that I need permission for things. Even like as an adult, that outward appearance of evil thing, they're just a big deal to me. They're important to me. So in the beginning of 2023, I had 2 tattoos at that point, and I knew they weren't something that everyone would accept. I got my first tattoo, which is this one, the bee and the flowers. It's my favorite one of the 3 I have. I had that tattoo in 2021, and that was before the Strength of the Youth was updated. So it was still a written guideline to not get tattoos at all. And I knew that it was a thing. I knew that I made the choice for myself, because I knew that based on that Strength of Youth guideline, tattoos were 100% considered taboo. They were against the church. I did not expect everyone to care for them, for my tattoo. I did not expect everyone to condone it or care about it. But as you know, in October 2022 conference, they announced an update to the Strength of Youth, which was changed to emphasize choices and agency. And they even changed the details on many of the things, which I frankly feel are very, very wonderful. Myself and a lot of people, particularly women, have suffered a lot of trauma from the old Strength of Youth regarding our sexuality and our modesty, and us being responsible for our partner and not being something that is enticing to a boy, and it changes things, including that it doesn't talk about masturbation at all anymore. It says 16 is a good guideline, but it doesn't say don't date until 16. It talks about tattoos and piercings and even clothing, that when you choose something that is permanent for your body, to do so prayerfully and thoughtfully. It doesn't say don't get a tattoo or don't get a second piercing. It leaves out a mention of shoulders and how long shorts should be. And it just says to make mindful decisions with the guidance of the Spirit, which I appreciate. And I think that is a much healthier way to address things. And it's good, right? Like, let's trust the youth to, and weirdly enough, like our adults who are still somehow required to adhere to the expectations that we give our children in the Strength of Youth pamphlet. Let's trust them to make decisions for themselves. One small step, I guess, though it is going to take a few decades for that to get to be embraced fully. Around March of April 2023, there was a stake conference. So this is 2 years ago now. It was 2 years ago in March 2023. This was while I was in the Relief Society presidency. Let's see. I didn't want to go to the stake conference. We had this stake president who, he's still to this day, the stake president. He'd been in that position for around 10 years. He was there when I married Ches, and I'm pretty sure he's still there, because even though I've removed my records from the church, I still get Stake Relief Society like invitations and emails and stuff. I actually also still get emails. I got invited to, I'll talk about that later. I'll do another video later this week. Let me just notate here, invite. I gotta talk about it. Okay, so anyway, this guy's been in there a really long time. I think they say that like bishops are supposed to be in the bishopric for 4 years. I think stake presidents are supposed to be in there for like 6 years, and you're supposed to get a new presidency, but this guy's been there a really long time. I don't know exactly how long, but I've been married to Ches now. We're going on 13 years this year, and he's been around and been he's been the stake president for the majority of it. So he kind of has overstayed his welcome in my book. Every time we go to stake conference, I don't have a lot of experience with this person on an individual basis that isn't related to church. I'm sure that as a person, he's fantastic. I find that with members on an individual basis, they are wonderful people individually. But when you put them into a church setting and you give them a platform to speak about their opinions and their feelings about anybody who they assume when they're talking to people at church that everybody has the same opinion and everybody feels exactly the same way and everybody's experience is all the same. And so they feel very safe in making these kinds of comments and talking about things in certain ways that kind of betrays an inner dialogue that they have for themselves that you may not ever see in another setting. Do you know what I mean? And so it kind of like people online when they're commenting on stuff and they don't know you and they think that they can hide behind their keyboard and nobody's going to know who they are, and even if they they just think that they can do that. And anyway, we were going to have the stake conference, and every time we had a stake conference, this guy would have some ludicrous stuff to say. One time he just talked about abortion, like the whole time, about how like it was during the whole revocation of Roe versus Wade, and it was super frustrating because it's just not that simple. It's not just as simple as don't have sex, and it's just not as simple as, don't kill babies. It's not as simple as those things. And the people he was preaching to, they have these opinions because they are fairly wealthy, middle class, predominantly white men, and even the women predominantly white. And because of the fundamental beliefs and behaviors that they typically employ, the vast majority of them will never be in a situation where abortion could be something that they even need to consider. And that excludes the things that happen because late-term abortion isn't about getting rid of a baby. It's about really horrific things have happened unexpectedly, and that baby has a name and a bedroom and a family that is expecting and loving and wanting them. And so, that doesn't, all these things that they're preaching about doesn't even take those kinds of things into consideration. And I don't want to get into that because that's not the topic here. but there was also like, it just wasn't a place where we needed to have that discussion. There was one time that he spent the entire 2-hour session of conference listing off behaviors that we need to repent for. Like no other talks that I remember or anything, just him telling us to repent of really, really basic things, like not spending enough time reading scriptures. Repent of that, okay? Watching TV on Sunday, repent of that. Not donating enough to fast offerings, or for honking your car horn at another driver. It was those kinds of things, like the most minuscule human behaviors that aren't godly. He just listed them off and said, I invite you to repent of that behavior. I repent of this. Change your behavior. Fix this, focus on being better. And it was just so not only boring and depleting, but I was angry after that session, because I just thought, like, this is too high an expectation. Like, people can't exist this way. And then I felt bad. Like, the wicked find the truth to be hard kind of a thing. Like, I kept thinking that, and I was like, yeah, I need to change my attitude. Like, obviously I'm being very, very layman and Lemuel, like I am murmuring about this. I am upset about this thing, when person who is in a position to tell me how I can be better is telling me these things. And instead of doing that, I am mad that he's telling me to change and be better, and I shouldn't be doing that. Anyway, at this time, I did not want to go to state conference. I felt as though the Spirit was telling me I shouldn't even be there. Like, it was that strong a feeling that I was like, look, there's got to be something going on here. Like, I am not meant to be at that meeting. But I was in a leadership position, and the elders quorum president, who I talked about, who I really respected and I admired, he and his wife, she's feisty and outspoken and lovely, and I just love her. They were great examples to me, and I wanted to, support him, because he had asked for our ward's help in putting the chairs up and taking them down. And I did not want to not be supportive. Like, I wanted to be a support to him in his calling as well. So we set up the chairs, and it was just me and Ches. We had Clementine with us, but my kids weren't there for the weekend. They had been with their dad, which I am very grateful for in this instance. We set up the chairs, we sat down, and the first talk was the stake president. And he got up and he said that he had a lot of people approach him, and, things that never happened for 500, Alex, am I right? Nobody cares. Nobody approached him. This is such crap. This is just him wanting to push an opinion, like maybe like one person, or maybe his wife he talked to, or something like that. This is just him having an excuse to stand up and say, this is my opinion and you guys need to follow it, and I'm going to blame it on other people who say that these things happened. And he said that he had all these people approach him and say that there's no morality in the strength of youth anymore, and therefore there is no morality in the church, and that they are appalled at the people running out to get tattoos and piercings. And he gave a 45-minute talk about how tattoos are immoral, and how it's an immoral decision to get those tattoos, and not only get and not to get them because the Lord has said not to get them. Note, the Lord has not said any such thing. Hinckley had an opinion about it over 30 years ago. And that morality lies in having a clear, unblemished skin. He also talked about that clothing that you wear, he also addressed that as well. Clothing that you wear, even if you are not endowed, should be able to cover your garments. It should cover your shoulders. You should not wear midriffs. He completely and blatantly just went back on all of the things that the presidency of the church, which should be the official consensus regarding the strength of youth, he basically went over all of it and just basically undid it, which again, like I said, I feel like the church sees our local leadership as little mini prophets. And so the prophet can say one thing, but it's so like distantly removed that they're going to listen to their bishop and their stake president way more adherently than they are going to the prophet. And anyway, I wanted to leave, and I still wanted to support the elders quorum president. And I didn't want to make a scene, because then it's like, oh, she was offended, and all that. So we stayed. But my husband, who also has several tattoos, he stood with the congregation to sing the rest hymn, which was like right after the tattoo talk. And he rolled up his sleeves so they would be visible. His tattoos would be visible, and which was awesome. And then the next talk was by a woman, and I think she was like the district mission president's wife or something like that. And her talk was about loving others and not to judge people, because we don't know what another person's life is like. And she said something like, we must love everyone, even if they have tattoos, stake president, which my heart just swelled with love for. I adored that. Like, I just don't care if someone doesn't like my tattoos. Like, I don't care that very much, I don't care about that very much at all. If somebody were to be like, your tattoo is ugly, I'd be like, well, I don't care. Like, I like my tattoo, and that's cool. Like, it doesn't affect me what you think of me, and I mean, I got my tattoos knowing that people weren't going to like them, and it's fine. I didn't get them for other people. I got them for me, and I knew they were controversial. But like, local leadership is reversed, that same way that the prophet is. And like the stake president or the bishop says something, no matter how bizarre, then it's like, well, that is the word of God. That is prophecy, and is taken so out of proportion that it's just permission and fodder for those who are overly religious to judge and shame others based on what they look like. So people who already had tattoos at that time, like, sure, there's going to be a significant portion of that congregation who are going to say, oh, the stake president said that even though the presidency of the church has changed this and said that we should, make decisions for ourselves prayerfully. If I want to get a tattoo, I need to make sure that I am prayerfully considering the consequences of that. This is a permanent decision for my body. If I want to get multiple piercings, this is a permanent decision for my body. And I need to make sure that I understand that and that I'm doing that prayerfully. Instead, the stake president is like, don't do it. And they're like, so there's going to be that significant portion of the congregation who is going to be like, we're not going to do that. I'm not going to get a tattoo. I'm going to double down on that, and I'm going to adhere to the old rules, even though they're not that significant anymore, and I'm not going to do it. So he gets up and he says that. But there's also going to be, and I know myself, and I know at least a dozen other people in that congregation who have tattoos, and they already have them. You can, yes, I know you can go and get laser removal of the tattoos and everything like that. It's expensive and it's painful, and people like their tattoos, and I don't want to get rid of my tattoos. I like them. And so they're there. They have the tattoos. They're already there. And it doesn't really matter whether or not, like, people who are going to use what the stake president said as a tool to judge others' religiosity or the other people's worthiness just because of something that they can see. And people are going to do that. They are not going to look at a tattoo and be like, oh, did you get that before or after your conversion to the church? Did you get that before or after the stake president gave that talk and said, don't get those tattoos, even though the Strength of Youth says that you should make a decision for yourself? They're not going to think of that, and they're not going to ask those questions. They're just going to look at that person that has a tattoo, and they're going to be like, they're unworthy. That was an immoral decision that they made. And that's what bothers me. Is not that the stake president doesn't like my tattoos. I don't even know if he knew that I had tattoos personally. It bothers me that the things that he and any other leadership says are basically permission for other people to continue to discriminate against other people in various ways. However minuscule that might seem to you, well, you just have an opinion about them. It's not really discriminating. It kind of is, because it's just, I just can't condone those kinds of things that make other people feel like they have some kind of authority or superiority over other people. sorry, I had to talk to my Scarlett. So, yeah, so moving on. About a year into my service in the presidency, so around the end of 2023, the president, the Relief Society president for our ward, she told us that she didn't feel like women were wearing their garments the way they should. And I don't know if this was like her talking or some meeting she had with the bishop or something, though I think looking back, it was a topic of high interest in general because of what happened in the April 2024 General Conference. She wanted us to visit each sister in our ward, in our district. So not all of us together in the ward, but each of us in our district. So the way it was organized was the whole ward, like the ward directory, was divided into 3 separate districts. The president had one district, the first counselor had the second district, and I, the second counselor, had the third district. And so those would be the women that I would, like our call tree, where I would call one person and I would say, contact your ministering teachers or the people you minister to about this thing, or, like any, like I would have this list of women that I was supposed to contact about things. Anyway, excuse me. She wanted us to ask them directly. She wanted us to visit them in person, each individually on our own time, and ask them directly if they were wearing their garments and emphasize their importance. And I told you that I struggled with speaking up. Before I got called into Relief Society, I was very outspoken about things that I didn't agree with, or that I was like, look, we need to think about this other perspective or whatever. I was outspoken about that stuff, but then when I got called into the Relief Society, I kind of quieted a little bit because I felt like I needed to be an example, and I was worried about, like, it was dumb. I should have been like, this is me, and this is, I got called to this position because of who I am, and so I'm not going to change anything, but I kind of did. But I did speak up on this. I said that, frankly, that Our Lady's underwear was not our business, and I wouldn't participate in that. Luckily, the first counselor also agreed, and she said that in order to get a recommend, they already have to answer that question to the bishopric, which is also ludicrous. And we didn't do that. We weren't going to talk to women about their underwear. We were going to just love them. And thank goodness, right? But I didn't wear my garments regularly. It was just one of those things where, like, people judge those things, and the church basically hands over permission for that judgment and the encouragement to judge. And while there's not really like a telltale culture of officially, like the church doesn't say, hey, if you see something suspicious, let us know. But people do say things, and then people approach you and ask how you're doing, like how you're doing and what's going on. A couple of weeks before I left, I hadn't said anything to anybody and asked, and I post on Facebook, just something super small, really inconspicuous. Like, I was like, coffee tastes like swallowing campfire charcoal. I hate coffee. It's so disgusting. Something like that, because I tried it and it was awful. And then I had given the heads up to the Relief Society that we were going to be at a baby blessing. My sister-in-law was blessing her baby, and so I had let the Relief Society know that I wouldn't be at church or available for meetings or anything that day. I wasn't lying. Like, we planned to go to the baby blessing for real, but we ended up not going to the blessing because Ches just didn't feel comfortable standing, not standing in the circle yet. We hadn't told anybody that we had left yet. We didn't want to go to, we didn't want to go to church. First of all, we have to go to church for the baby's blessing. We didn't want to go, but we decided that to just use that day for us. Instead of going to our ward and showing up and whatever, we just decided, even though we said we were going to this baby blessing and that was the intention, but we weren't comfortable. So we decided to just stay home. I deep cleaned my son's bedroom. I really, really needed it. And, my sister-in-law, she also lives still an hour away from us. So if we had gone, we would have been gone basically all day. Like, it's an hour there, 2-hour church that, like that side of the family does not leave church for family functions. They go through the whole church thing, and then they do the thing after church. And then, of course, the after party, and then another drive home. So at least like 4 to 5 hours if we didn't dawdle. Do you know what I mean? If we didn't get into conversations and hang out and enjoy the family. But my ward was out of church by 11. We started at 9. And as soon as church was out, here came the bishop to our house to check in on us. And then an hour after him, here came the Relief Society presidency, because we never visit with each other on an official basis. We thought today was a good day to visit with you, since you aren't going, since you aren't going around with us. So how are you? And how is the baby blessing? Like, it's 1 o'clock. I literally told you I wasn't going to be home during this time because of the blessing. It was far away. I'm in sweats. I have a messy bun and no makeup. I clearly did not go to the blessing, and you can see that. So like, people see things, and yes, I don't have a garage. I have a carport. People can see that my car is there or whatever. There's the slight possibility that they drove past my house and they were like, oh, Bray is home. But even if that was the case, like on a regular Sunday, I've been sick and stayed home. We've all been sick and stayed home, or we've all collectively chosen we're not going to church this day for any various reason, and people don't come over in droves to check on me. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe a text, not usually. So this was different. This was clearly different than just your car was in the driveway, So yeah, like you can clearly see, people see things and then they tell on you. My bishop is not on Facebook. My Relief Society presidency counterparts are older women who are also not on Facebook. Someone absolutely told on me that I tried coffee. That is the only thing that I had on Facebook. It's the only thing I've said to anybody, because at that time I was determined to quietly disappear into the background. I was scared of the repercussions. And I know apologists will say to all these experiences here that the church is perfect, people aren't perfect, and that it's just me being offended. And to quote Bednar, we should just choose not to be offended. But it wasn't really that I was offended so much as it just goes back to like that othering that always bothered me so much from the time I was about in junior high, and I started realizing that that's what was happening, and I was in seminary. Like we were putting ourselves on a pedestal and acting like we were better than others who look different than we do, or dress different, or who make visible choices that you don't agree with, or who aren't members. And I'll tell you this, every boy who ever hurt me, left me, cheated on me, abused me, or otherwise manipulated me was LDS. Even the boy I broke up with in college, he never hurt me. We parted ways, which was painful, but it was because we needed to pursue other paths. He didn't hurt me. The church is not exempt from bad people. It doesn't hold a monopoly on good men any more than it does on priesthood, God, or spiritual experiences. And it isn't so much about being offended by that one experience or any one specific experience. It's about the fact that they all belong to an institution that systematically teaches people that superiority and otherness is something that they should be doing, and that it's okay and encouraged to judge, demoralize, and exclude other people. If the church didn't regularly preach that from the pulpit, that this is the way we are supposed to treat others, then it wouldn't be so blatantly prevalent in our everyday interactions with people in the church. In some cases, being offended is the correct response, and that's something that you need to remember, because it isn't just a person here or there who thinks this way, it's the whole institution and the teachings directly from the conference center that encourage people to act this way. It is at 54 minutes. I am not finished yet. I am about halfway through what I prepared, because I keep going off on those tangents because, again, this is very fresh to me and I remember all these details. So I'm going to end there, but I will be back again next week. Please tune in to follow through to the end of my Mormon story. Thank you so much, and think terrestrial. Have a wonderful day.